Hi there, Kendra Tolbert here. I'm a registered dietitian and yoga teacher, and I specialize in women's health and fertility. And today's video is an interview with Samaria Garrett. Samaria is a registered dietitian and a licensed hair practitioner, and she brings together her many passions and areas of expertise to help women address the underlying causes of their hair and scalp conditions. We talked all about PCOS and pregnancy and postpartum, the three Ps. Is that what we should start calling them? And how they can cause scalp and hair changes or issues. And she shared some great tips on using nutrition to help to address those challenges and changes. I know that you're going to love this interview, so let's get right into it.
Yes, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to be a part of your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying yes. I have been, and I told you this before, like lurking on your Instagram for so long. So this feels like a real treat to actually be chatting with you and not just being like, what is she doing now? Not in a creepy way, I promise.
Well, that's so sweet. I definitely have ghosted my Instagram a few times, so I hope you've been able to, put together the pieces of what I've been up to. But yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Good, good, good. Now you have such an interesting combination of expertise and experience, and I would love it if you would introduce yourself and tell everyone who's watching what you do and why you do it.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll give you the long story short. So my name is Samaria Garrett. I am a registered dietitian based in Tennessee. I actually grew up on a farm, and that was my first introduction to really like the food system. And I studied agriculture actually. I went to agricultural high school, but when I took a nutrition class as a part of my agricultural tract, I was like, this is the part of the food system that I want to work in, the part that works with people. I also was in high school around the time of like the big like natural hair movement. And so I chopped my hair off, did the big chop. And if you think about like being in high school, right, teenage girl chopping your hair off, you're navigating so much when it comes to like just self-esteem and like relationships and connecting with others. And so I really feel like for me the big chop was such a fundamental part of I guess becoming a woman kind of. And even so throughout high school, college, I helped a lot of my friends like build up their confidence and their skill set when it came to chopping their hair off and learning this new texture, right, that many of us have never seen before. All this time though, I was studying nutrition, right? I was going to become a dietitian. And so when I graduated, got my master's, and I studied clinical nutrition, and the pandemic happened, and I was going to go into sports nutrition, but when the pandemic happened, sports were canceled, and all this time I had kind of started like I had been thinking about starting a private practice or doing something in entrepreneurial space. I come from a very entrepreneurial family. If you know anything about like farming, it's very, you got to figure it out, right? You're literally taking a seed and cultivating it. And so I feel like I've always had that spirit of figuring it out or kind of or creating things, right? Just from growing up on a farm and seeing that process of a life cycle of plants and animals. And so I think that's really always been a part of my mind. And so when I got into private practice, initially started talking to people and hearing specifically women and women of color mostly specifically hearing them say things like, I know I'm here to talk about my diabetes or my PCOS or my hypertension, but I'm also experiencing like hair loss. And I know that's not that important, like automatically kind of like dismissing that and saying like, that's not really important. Like I've tried to talk to my stylist or this, that, and the other. And me just being a helper and being someone that is on the side, very interested in my own hair journey and knowing how important that is. I started digging into it, and insurance definitely is not covering right that time, but I I wanted to learn more about it. And so I started studying more about like hair loss and seeing that connection between nutrition and hair loss and hormones. I wasn't really seeing any other dietitians doing that. And even still to this day, I really have not been able to find like that like mentor in the dietitian, like in the dietetic space. Um, but I've just kind of figured it out as I've gone and learned and read and connected the doc, worked with dermatologists and learned from them in order to kind of get to where I am today and like really helping people with their health and hormones, but not dismissing the very real concern of hair loss. So in 2022, I went to hair school and I became a licensed hairstylist. So I actually have a license to touch the hair, treat. I don't do much styling. Look, I can do the base. I do the basics, right? I can help someone with the curl set, but really the reason why I went, it was so I could learn like that education, right? Understand how products work. And also be able to help people with simple styling because once their hair grows back, like they need to know how to like manage it. And even sometimes hair loss can happen as a result of like mismanagement. So I really went so that I could get that license to be able to touch the hair, treat the hair in my state, but also to learn so that I could better educate people and not just give them like my opinion on based on what worked for me.
I love every bit of that. I love that story. I went natural, don't know why. Um, my first year of undergrad during finals week. Like,
Oh,
why was
oh,
that?
oh,
Why'd I do
perfect
it
timing.
then?
Perfect timing.
It was terrible. But anyway, so I get that doing something so big
Yeah.
during a formative time and
Hmm.
how much that affects your identity. And you're right. People kind of dismiss the aesthetic pieces sometimes, feeling like it's not as important, but it absolutely
Hmm.
is. It affects our well-being, it affects how we see ourselves. So
Yeah.
I love that you never stopped supporting women in
Mm-hmm.
that area.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love that. So you touched on the fact that you see people with PCOS. So I'm
Hmm.
wondering if we can kind of camp out there because a lot of people who watch this channel have PCOS. So can you talk about some of the hair and scalp challenges that someone with PCOS might experience?
Absolutely. So, interestingly enough, with PCOS, the people who have PCOS, they might experience like this double whammy, like excess hair growing in places they don't necessarily want it to, and then the hair loss on the scalp, which is called right, the hirsutism that happens, and then the female pattern hair loss or androgenetic alopecia that happens on the scalp. And essentially, that is happening due to the increase in androgens a lot of times. There also can be other underlying factors. I would say like people who have hair loss, there might be other factors happening there. So although there's initially that those increased androgens that are slowly like suffocating essentially the hair follicle, there also might be some nutrient related issues that are
Mhm.
also impacting the hair loss cycle. So that's essentially like what is happening. It's a slow androgenic alopecia is a slow progressive form of hair loss. It doesn't happen all at once. I like to explain it to people and like maybe you didn't notice hair loss, a lot of hair in your hairbrush, but you noticed that your part was getting thinner year after year, or your ponytail was getting thinner year after year. And so that is a hallmark sign of the androgenic alopecia. They also might experience oiliness, excess oiliness on the scalp but due to the increased androgens and inflammation as well.
There's a lot of goodness that you shared there. I like that you pointed out that there's also the oiliness of the scalp. Can that
Mhm.
contribute to dandruff for some people or anything like
Yes.
that?
Yes, it definitely can. It can because the oil on the scalp, the bacteria, the fungus on the scalp, then eats that oil, and then it's like this like vicious cycle. That's why sometimes, and I see this a lot with like women like textured hair, because when you go to the doctor and the dermatologist, and you're prescribed a topical shampoo to treat that dandruff, it's very drying, right? They're trying to clear
Mhm.
up the excess oil so that the bacteria doesn't have the oil to feed off of. But then what does that do to textured hair? Makes it very dry. And so that's where I think that like culturally relevant like education kind of comes in. It's like, okay, we're not going to use this like it's traditionally being prescribed because that's not going to work for our like hair texture.
I know you were just full of good tips. So I would love to know what sort of nutrition
Mhm.
tips you might have. What are the
Mhm.
nutrition changes that might address some of the underlying concerns for
Mhm.
someone who's experiencing those hair related changes due to PCOS?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what we are educating patients on like in for nutrition in general for PCOS, right? So those like the insulin resistance that often happens with in many people who have PCOS, the addressing the diet culture, right? In that's very like prevalent, right? In the I guess in our population in general, right? But especially maybe in this population that's mainly being told lose weight, move more, eat less, right? The hair is a very energy intensive process. It requires energy, and we get energy through our food, through calories, right? And so we have to feed the process. So my when I'm counseling my patients on PCOS, I'm like, all right, we got to make sure you're eating enough calories. Because although your hair is a very energy intensive process, it's also very low on the totem pole when it comes to priorities, right? Your body's going to prioritize your brain, your heart, right? Your lungs, right? Those things that you actually need to stay alive. And although we think that we need our hair to stay alive, like we don't, right? No one ever like people aren't like dying because they are bald, right? The body is able to move on, and so it that being the case, we have to make sure we're not just like doing the bare minimum when it comes to nutrition. We need to start looking at those more like optimal. And I know in your case, like in the fertility space, you probably are kind of having these similar conversations because reproductive health, like your reproductive system, isn't necessary for life either. And so the same thing with hair. You want to make sure we're eating in those like optimal nutritional ranges, making sure we're getting enough of those calories. The second one is protein. The hair is a protein, right? Keratin, collagen, right? We need to make sure we're eating quality proteins. So, animal proteins, if people are eating animals, those lean animal proteins, plant proteins as well. Hydration, the first thing that we do, right, is when our hair gets dry, we put a little oil on it. But I would say, when was the last time you drank oil when you were thirsty? Right? When we need water, we need to hydrate. But for so many cultural reasons, right, we aren't putting water on our hair on a regular basis. So if we're not maybe putting water topically, drinking enough water, make sure we're hydrating because the scalp is skin too. Right? And so we want to make sure we're hydrating the scalp. And then there are the micronutrients like vitamin C, making sure you're getting those citrus because vitamin C is a cofactor to collagen, zinc, right? Those like pumpkin seeds. Because sometimes there can, in the presence of zinc deficiency, there could be hair loss as well. So those are like my main like recommendations that I'm usually looking at with PCOS related hair
Those
loss.
are some
Mhm.
really good tips. You said vitamin C and zinc were especially important. So often when I see these kind of like listicles of
Mhm.
nutrients that are important, I then see people run out and buy these supplements
Mhm.
separately, or they start
Mhm.
taking a prenatal and maybe they're
Mhm.
not in that
Mhm.
preconception or prenatal or postpartum
Mhm.
phase. Is there any truth to the idea that taking excess vitamins or taking a prenatal or
Mhm.
taking like a hair vitamin is going to force your hair to grow faster or longer or thicker or any of that?
Mhm. There, I find more evidence on specific um, specific vitamins versus blends, because a lot of times the blends are not necessarily formulated with enough of the vitamin or mineral to actually be like effective for the hair. So I would probably recommend a higher dose of like a keratin or something like that versus a hair supplement,
Got yeah.
right?
That
Or a
makes
higher
tons of
dose
sense.
of vitamin D, right? Or if there is like signs of zinc deficiency, like a zinc supplement versus a blend that may have like a little bit of everything.
Got yeah. Got yeah.
And
Okay.
then I also am very much like food first. Let's look at your diet first, and then from there maybe we need to supplement.
Yeah, we're definitely on the same page with that.
Hmm.
We're
Hmm.
definitely on the same
Yeah.
page. Okay.
Yeah.
So many of the people that I work with who have PCOS, their next goal after kind of managing their PCOS symptoms is
Hmm.
to get pregnant. And so
Hmm.
then they end up experiencing a whole different set of
Hmm.
changes, some of them good, some of them they actually really enjoy when it comes to their hair and their scalp. And
Yeah.
even if someone doesn't have PCOS, pregnancy brings about a lot of hair and scalp
Hmm.
changes.
Hmm.
What are some of those and why does that happen?
Yeah. So during a pregnancy, a lot of people may experience like the thicker hair, like the pregnancy like glow, and that's due to the high estrogen. Right, the high estrogen, progesterone, which is sustaining the pregnancy. Also, the increased blood flow can bring like more nutrients, and also too, just in general, people may be more conscious of their nutrition during this phase in life, right? They're starting to now think, oh, I need to maybe prioritize nutrition because I'm growing another human. And so maybe that as well could contribute to some of the improvements as well. So that is particularly like why those hormones and the increased blood flow, why people are experiencing the that like pregnancy glow, or just like increased hair growth, less hair fall. That estrogen is sustaining that hair growth, the hair growth state, right? The anagen phase. It may typically like last like 3 to 4 months, right? And so then when you have the excess estrogen, it might be lasting longer.
That makes tons of sense. Okay. That definitely makes tons of
Mhm.
sense. I
Yeah.
often hear people say that it's the prenatal vitamin that's doing it. So hearing that it's really the hormonal changes and perhaps
Mm-hmm.
nutrition is contributing because
Yeah.
people are maybe taking in more of those nutrients they need. That
Mm-hmm.
definitely brings some
Mm-hmm.
clarity to that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any negative things that people might experience when it comes to their scalp or their hair during pregnancy as a result of those hormonal changes?
Mm-hmm. I haven't typically like heard of that like typically happening. It's usually the like post, right?
Yeah.
The postpartum hair loss. I haven't necessarily heard of of those hormones causing negative hair and scalp changes specifically.
Well, good. I'm
Right,
happy
right,
to
right.
hear
It's enough
that.
changes. It's enough changes already.
There's already enough happening in the body.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Now, are there any specific things that people can do or should do to support, I don't know, their hair growth during pregnancy?
I would say continuing your prenatal based off of what the
Mm.
OBGYN or your dietitian is recommending. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend like taking an extra like hair and skin and nail vitamin, because it's not really necessary. I would just continue the normal like hair routine, or let me say I would continue a healthy hair care routine. So if maybe you weren't doing one before, maybe start anticipating that postpartum hair loss, and then continuing the prenatal vitamin during pregnancy.
Very good. Very good. Are there any like vitamins, supplements, or even like salon services or hair products that kind of become, I don't want to say dangerous. That feels kind of
Mhm.
alarmist, but you know what I mean.
Mhm,
Something that
mhm.
maybe people should avoid during pregnancy.
I would definitely avoid like relaxers and maybe even certain hair colors. I think even with some of the like new articles coming out about around like braiding hair and those potential like endocrine disrupting chemicals on the braiding hair, which is funny because that's usually like the hairstyle, right? That we get to in our like last like trimester because it's easy. But it's like what is like what are we like getting from that braiding hair? So maybe
Mhm.
looking, I know there's some like plant-based braiding hairs that have come out, so maybe looking into some of those. And in general, I think looking at hair products, like when we think about those endocrine disrupting chemicals, looking at the hair products that you're using on your hair, and especially the ones that are sitting on your scalp, right? Maybe your shampoos, there's a little bit more like leeway there, right? Because you're like kind of rinsing those out, but like your conditioners, your leave-in conditioners, the products you're putting like on your scalp that have the opportunity to absorb, like what else is your body absorbing from those products? So
Yeah.
I would recommend like looking at those.
Those are really important questions to ask and things
Mhm,
to take a
mhm,
look at. It
mhm,
feels like someone like you, people who do things that are very similar to you, are essential for like the
mhm,
prenatal person or the pregnant
mhm,
person,
mhm,
because I think sometimes people get the information that they should stop doing something, but then they
mhm.
don't have someone to talk to about, okay, now what do I do? Like, if I shouldn't be getting this braid hair, like, am I just
Yeah,
not going to wear braids? Like, that's not an
yeah.
option, especially if I'm pregnant during the summer. Like, that's, that's just not an option. Or if I stop doing a relaxer,
Mm,
what am I supposed to do? So it's really important that there are
mhm.
people who understand the culture doing this work so
Yeah,
that people aren't just told stop it. They're told what to do now that they need an
yes,
alternative.
absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
now this woman who you've helped through PCOS and
Hmm.
helped through pregnancy, now she has given birth.
Uh-huh.
What can she expect now that she's given birth?
To happen. Yeah. That postpartum hair loss, which most people experience due to the dramatic drop in estrogen post like childbirth. It's a normal drop, but it's so dramatic from the higher levels and the highly like the consistently high levels that were happening during pregnancy. So when they drop, then the hair that you would have lost during pregnancy and the hair that is in the telogen phase. So there's the anagen phase, which is the growing phase, the telogen or the telogen phase that is the hair fall phase. So the hairs that shifted into the telogen phase, they all kind of come out. It's very dramatic, and a lot of times around like the hair, around the temples and the hairline, there can be like bald patches. There's a lot of hair that comes out in the shower and your brush, and people can be very tempted to run and go do something about it at around that like 2 to 3 to 4 month mark post childbirth. But I always recommend like giving it a little time. If people are still experiencing hair loss around the 6 to 9 month mark postpartum, then I think we maybe need to look at how is your nutrition, how is your thyroid, and also some of the lifestyle like factors, right? Maybe being like underslept or right, overly stressed, like those things. But I think that the 3 to 4 to 5 month mark, it's a normal period, and the hair should start to grow back after that.
I think just knowing that it's normal
Mm,
is really, really helpful, because I think a
yeah.
lot of people think that it must be something that they need to change or
Mm,
something that they did
mhm,
wrong. And
mhm,
what you spoke to about the idea that around the 4, 5, 6 month, the hair
mhm.
will start to grow back leaves me with the question around whether or not some of the things that people are doing are actually helping, or if they're
Yeah.
just now seeing the changes that would have occurred naturally. So let's say at the 3 month mark, they start to use a new topical something or other. And then about 3 months
Mm,
later, they start to see the hair come back and they're convinced it was what
mm,
they started using at the 3 month mark, or was
yeah.
that just what was going to happen because the
Right.
hormonal shifts were changing?
Like that good old correlation versus like causation that I think we
Exactly.
always have to ask in these like scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So tons of good tips here. I think we cleared up some myths. Are there, or maybe is there just one additional myth that you would love to see just go away when it comes to hair and nutrition?
Mhm. Man. Okay. Hair nutrition. Okay. That there. Like, there's so many.
So
And
many.
even like within that, there's still so many. I think because I really do work at that from like a more like non like diet like weight inclusive like perspective just in my work I personally believe that's like safe like more safe for women of color in a space like in a world that's already like trying to like shrink us and change us like that is just that's my point of view when it comes to nutrition care and so I would say like it's almost impossible to restrict and regrow your hair like at the same time. And I find myself all like repeatedly educating on this. And it's really difficult because there's this fear of if I eat more, I will gain weight. So yeah, I would say that's like the biggest myth. And I think there's like so much that like, I can say on it, but it's really tough. But for the people that I've been able to like help through that, they've been able to see progress in their hair regrowth and even things that have happened with their body have really shocked them as well.
Absolutely. Yes. I will always be happy for someone to repeat that people deserve to eat enough, that people need to eat
Mhm,
enough, that
mhm, mhm,
dieting is often detrimental. It's
mhm.
not something that's harmless. It
Yeah,
definitely can have ill effects in so many areas
yeah,
of our health and our appearance, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Like we talk about the weight cycling, right? The yo-yoing back and forth. Those things absolutely like impact the hair. So topically, if we were to pull out a piece of hair, and granted there are other factors that can contribute to hair integrity, like but if we pull out a piece of hair and look at it under the microscope, we can see like the ebbs and flows in the integrity of the strand. So, for example, if as the hair was growing, if you like got a relaxer or you experienced breakage or you went through 9 months of on a 500 calorie diet or 1200 like what like we can sometimes see those patterns along the hair strand, right? I would say the hair tells a story, and so those ebbs and flows like in the back and forth that happens with dieting, chronic dieting, yo-yo dieting, absolutely can negatively impact the hair growth cycle. And so I sometimes have to ask my patients, like, all right, which one are we going to choose?
yeah.
Um, and there's like no judgment there because there it's we live in a world that preaches like you can have it all. You need to do these things. But in my work I have yet to really see that. And so I have to often have that initial conversation of like, okay, like which way are we going to go? Or else we're kind of going to be fighting back and forth, wanting this to happen, but also wanting this to happen. And so it's always helpful if we can kind of get on one page and be aligned and what those goals are.
Ooh, so much goodness there. And we could absolutely continue to chat about it, but I want to respect your time. But I know that people are going to want to hear more from you. I know that people are going to want to work with you. So, where can they learn more about what you have going on and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media most times. They can find me at Your Hair Nutritionist on Instagram. And then they can find me on my website at www.feedingtheroot.com. And you can learn more about me there, and then connect with my office. So I do work in private practice one-on-one. We are licensed throughout Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, Arkansas, and we also network with multiple insurance companies as well. And so we're able to get nutrition services covered under insurance. And we also work telehealth and in person in the Memphis area. So yeah, that's where they can connect with me.
Beautiful. I will link to all of your links down below in the description box. So if you're watching this and you want to connect with her, definitely open up that description box and click away. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.